Welcome back, Financial Issues. I'm Dan Celia. It's great to be here. You're welcome to queue your call up, 866-300-9298. But right now, we've got a special guest with us, Anthony Hopp. Anthony was with us last month. Anthony is Vice President of External Relations with Samaritan Ministries. Now, you guys know Samaritan Ministries, obviously, because we talk about it an awful lot. And it is a health-sharing ministry that my wife and I use, that we are a part of. So I'm very familiar with it. And it is the only one. They're all good. They're all good. They do a great job, I'm sure. But it's the one that I endorse and recommend because of the experience I've had being able to feel as though I could thoroughly vet the ministry. Anthony, welcome. Sure do appreciate you being back with us.
Good morning, Dan. A pleasure to be with you.
Anthony, I continue to have these conversations with so many folks. I did on last week, I think it was on Friday, where somebody was talking about the expense of their healthcare ministries and how difficult it is because, or their healthcare and how difficult it is because obviously dipping into their discretionary income. And, when I was finished with the call, I said, I don't, why aren't you guys going to SamaritanMinistries.org and getting the information that you need to get, or at least calling there and getting the information? It's so important. And you guys have 69,000 people like my wife and I that are sharing in each other's cost right now. And what would you say are some of the things that we as Americans need to kind of think about as we think about our health care, that we've become so accustomed to thinking a certain way that we've kind of lost some sight of some very important things?
Sure. I think it starts philosophically, Dan, with where is our healthcare money going? Increasingly, followers of Jesus are realizing that their healthcare dollars are most likely paying for practices to which we're opposed, things like abortion, gender reassignment surgery. And the majority of the time, that's the case. Another issue is just engagement. A lot of people are disengaged from their healthcare decisions. There's a third party either requiring or directing them, and one of the beautiful things about the model of healthcare sharing is that we get to direct our own healthcare. It's the family that's making those decisions. It's the relationship between the patient and the doctor, the way it should be. Another thing that we've gotten away from is community, that healthcare sharing allows its members to minister to one another and to meet one another's practical needs, not just the financial need, but the spiritual and emotional burden, which we don't talk about often in healthcare. It's usually just a monetary transaction, but whenever there's a healthcare need, there's a decent chance that there's a disruption in the rest of one's life. And so healthcare sharing members are able to address that as well.
Folks, we're speaking to Anthony Hopp, one of the vice presidents at Samaritan Ministries, and it's SamaritanMinistries.org, by the way. You bring up a great point, Anthony, in reference to, I think the relational part that we have in our healthcare with our physician or the specialist that is treating us is gone so often because it is so contingent upon what insurance companies are going to provide or what they're not going to provide, and what the doctor is kind of only allowed to prescribe certain kinds of treatment. And that's one of the biggest issues reasons why we've lost that relationship.
Yeah, it sure is. I had a conversation with one of my friends who went into his physician for a yearly checkup. He had written down a handful of items that he wanted to discuss. After the physical, he gets out his list. He starts rattling down, and the doctor puts up his hands and says, "Whoa, we can't talk about that because in order to do that, you're going to have to make a separate appointment because I have to code it differently." At that point, my friend reminded his doctor, remember, I'm self-pay. I'm a member of Samaritan. I'm going to be paying you cash. The doctor's face lit up, Dan, and he said, oh, you're right. We can talk about anything you want.
Yeah.
And as sad as that is, that's the place we're at.
That's
no longer about patient and doctor.
And that's the reaction I get from our family doctor, who we've had for 25 years, who, when we went to Samaritan, I remember I had to get an MRI on I have a herniated disc in my neck, and she said, well, I know I got to send you for the X-ray. The X-ray is not going to show anything, but they want the X-ray before they do the MRI. And I said, no. She said, oh, yeah, that's right. You're with the Health Sharing Ministry. And she just thought that was the greatest thing. Oh, you can go over right now. Why don't you go over and get the MRI, and I'll call over there. And so and we find that with every single doctor that we meet. And what I don't understand, I don't want to give out pricing, but I can speak for myself. My wife and I pay $440 a month that we share with other believers every month. And compared to what we were paying, we're saving, I don't know, about $1,400 a month compared to what we were a few years ago. So I don't understand why we're just, or are we? I mean, I feel like, I'm not sure whether we're seeing a resurgence in this, health sharing ministries like we should. I'm about finance. I want people to have as much discretionary income as they have for other things with their families that they need or do. And are people, now that it's possible that Obamacare is going to be repealed, is there less of a sense of urgency about this?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Dan. I think just the fact that we're looking at uncertainty, people have a tendency to sit and wait and see how things are going to pan out. We've still seen considerable growth. It's slowed a little bit, but not too much. I know that the whole Affordable Care Act really brought healthcare sharing ministries into the spotlight and kind of highlighted them, but we've never marketed based on being an escape hatch. The appeal has always been a principial one. It's been about the community. It's been about being able to honor God with your health care and live out your faith in a practical way. So I think we're seeing a steady growth. Part of it too is just the paradigm shift, as you can probably attest to. When you first encounter healthcare sharing, it's so radically different from everything we're accustomed to with insurance. It takes a little getting used to. And so healthcare sharing is really only 20 or 30 years old. Of course, it has its origins in the early church, but how we've seen it play out as a healthcare sharing organization is relatively recent. So I think it just takes some time for people to get used to the idea. The good news is that we're seeing sharing all over the place in the form of Uber and Airbnb and GoFundMe and Kickstarter, that sort of thing. So I think people are realizing, why can't the church come together and share medical expenses as well?
Yeah, and it's just, I know it is hard to get used to. The shift is dramatic, and it was a little bit harder for my wife than it was me. She's a nurse. She was involved in the state of Pennsylvania. RNs have to do a certain level of paperwork, and she ended up towards the closeout of her before she retired from that, doing that because she didn't want to sign off on what somebody else was doing. And so she ended up being this person for her floor to do the paperwork and processing. And what she saw was pretty amazing. She used to tell me stories about what insurances, how it was changing and what they weren't doing any longer. But she was a little skeptical, and it was a huge change. Now she just thinks it's the greatest thing in the world. She looks forward to her envelope every month that comes, and we pray for people on the list, and it's a wonderful thing. But I would just urge people to free up that discretionary income. It's so important that we do that as well, and we get back to the Book of Acts. Tell me what's coming, what you guys hope is coming from a legislative standpoint in healthcare, real quick, that could help Samaritan Ministries.
We'd love to see expansion of HSAs. Currently, healthcare sharing members are not able to use a health savings account because the IRS code states that you have to use it in conjunction with a high deductible plan. So that would be one great piece. Tax credits, if that happens, we'd like to see healthcare sharing ministries included with that. It doesn't look like necessarily that 30% surcharge is going to hang around, but if something like it did, we'd like healthcare sharing members to not be subject to that. In other words, if there's a gap in coverage, with the earlier version, there was talk about the insurance companies being able to assess a 30% surcharge for any gap in coverage. So those would be the three primary areas. Just equal fair treatment for healthcare sharing members. There's no reason to think that it won't happen. We've seen God intervene on our behalf in years past, and we're trusting that He'll continue to do the same, and that the freedom to continue healthcare sharing will remain.
Real quick, Secretary Price, he is familiar with Health Sharing Ministries, is he not?
Yes, he is.
Yeah. So chances are he's will hopefully embrace some of those things that you were just mentioning for Health Sharing Ministries.
Yeah, we hope so, and we have a public policy team and lobbyists who have been hard at work, tirelessly working to just make those right connections and make sure the story of healthcare sharing is told. That's
great. Anthony Hopp, Vice President with Samaritan Ministries, and folks, check them out, SamaritanMinistries.org. Look, even if you're struggling with your health care costs, SamaritanMinistries.org. Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it.